In this video we're going to take a look at a process of tracing for a portrait. This is for, at least in the context of this class project, I'm going to have you do it as like a zoom profile picture. But really it's just the process of taking a photographic image and then converting it into a vector. So during the class we'll take a look at the work of Shepard Fairey is a really good example of this. But we're basically taking something and tracing it and converting something which is made out of continuous tone image, where you get subtle transitions of tone, into something which is simply made up of flat areas of color. I had thought about having you do a bio, so it'd be nice if when you've completed your tracing, if you could also put a little bit about, first of all, what you know of your experience with Illustrator, and then also what your goal is with this Illustrator class. So you'll end up with something along these lines. I've made a clipping group around here, and we haven't gone over creating clipping groups as yet, but if you want to, we can do that. And then I've put a white shape behind it. So there's two versions of the tracing, one which has the background on it and one where it's been clipped out. And then the one that has the background on it, I've got a white rectangle over the top and lowered the opacity a little bit. So if I select that, you can see what I mean. So I've got the entire background there below, but there's something separating it. And then over the top I've got another copy of this with just the portrait sitting on top where it's clipped out. So I'll go over that another time. And then this is the finished tracing that I did, the initial tracing. And then we're also going to look at in the class is how we could adjust the color of the thing. One of them is using blending modes, so laying a color over the top. The nice thing about this is it creates a sense of unified color across the entire image, so it puts everything in the same kind of color range, as if it has the same lighting settings, which you're probably going to get to some extent from your own drawing, hopefully, if you're taking color directly from the image. But sometimes we want to simplify the color. Also, you might want to have sort of extreme versions. So we'll also take a look at this feature at the top here where it says recolor artwork. And these are two examples of where I've taken those images, taken the finished tracing and then recolored it by going up here at the top and going under edit, linking all the colors together and then adjusting the hue to a different position. So we'll take a look at an example of that as well. So first of all, in terms of tracing, there's a couple of things that this exercise is useful for. First of all, it's useful for getting used to using the pen tool. The pen tool is an excellent tool in Adobe Illustrator, but it's also useful in programs like Photoshop and InDesign. So if you can learn it here, it really works exactly the same way, particularly in Photoshop. There is one slight difference, which we'll talk about when we get to it, but basically they're the same thing. So if you learn it here, you'll learn it for other programs also. And it gives you a very accurate way to create a path. In other words, to form a shape. By plotting out points and by dragging out handles, you can create these beautiful Bezier curves. You can get very accurate shapes. If you were just drawing it freehand, it's more difficult to get the shape to be exactly how you want it to be. One thing about the pen tool is that it's not incredibly intuitive. It doesn't relate to the way that we draw typically. And so when you're using the pen tool initially, I think for most people it takes a little while to get used to it. So I'm going to go through the basics of this process fairly quickly just to show you what I mean. I'm going to make a copy of this and then do File New, and I'll create a new file. And then I don't need these other artboards, let's just delete this one. And then paste the photo in place. And then at the top here, in Illustrator, if I select the artboard tool, and then I go over to this area right here at the top, I can choose to fit artwork to the bounds or fit to selected artwork. So this is what I want it to do. I want it to fit to that area right there. The other thing I want to do is I want to convert this into a template layer. So this is one of the key things about doing this exercise that you need to understand. Anytime you trace something in Illustrator, it's a good idea to set it onto a template layer. And you can either do this when you initially place the image, so if you do File Place, and you find something that you want to trace from, you would make sure that you choose template here when you place it. If you forget to do that, or in this case we're just copying and pasting it from somewhere else, so we're not placing it. Once you get into the file itself, you can double click on the layer, and you can change any layer into a template layer by just clicking template right here. You'll notice here that there's a few things. So first of all, dim images has showed up. If template images was off, that would be unchecked as well, but it automatically dims the images. It also makes this layer a non-printing layer. This is one of the features of a template layer. So if you were to print this, if you trace part of this but the image was still there, even if the layer was turned off, it would actually print. But if we have it as a template, it's not going to print. Also, it dims the image, so it makes it easier for you to see what you're tracing over the top of, or what you can see your own drawing in relationship to the photograph. That's perhaps a better way of putting it. And then the other thing about it, and this is perhaps the most important thing, is that when we draw something, we're going to end up covering up stuff that we need to draw later on. And so because of that, we need to be able to see the photographic image when we're in outline mode. So we'll get to that in a second when we start tracing it, and I think you'll understand better when we start going through the process. But the ability to be able to see the photographic image when you're in outline mode is essential, and that's what makes it useful for a template layer. That's what the purpose of a template layer. Okay, so the next thing I need to do is, once I've placed the image here and I've set it as a template layer, I want to define the main areas of the image. So in this case, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a layer that's for the shirt, a layer that's for the chair, a layer that's for my head, basically all of my skin, so I'm going to include the neck as well. And then one layer maybe for the hat and another layer for the glasses. Now you could separate the background further maybe and have another layer for the steps and so on, but you can decide on how you organize the layers yourself. That depends on the way you think or the particular image as well. My philosophy with layers in Illustrator is that layers are not essential like they are in Photoshop. Pretty much anything you do in Photoshop you have to use layers for. Whereas in Illustrator it's very much more of a sort of organizational device. You could do pretty much everything all on one layer in Illustrator. But the advantage of the layers is it allows you to organize stuff so you can lock parts of the illustration so that when you're working on other areas you don't move things by mistake. It makes it easier for you to select things and so on. So it's a little bit like a filing cabinet. So I don't want to have a layer for every single object. It's kind of like a filing cabinet where you would, like if you wanted to put things into a filing cabinet, you wouldn't put a file folder, one for each month of a particular credit card bill, like January Visa card, for instance, and then February Visa card. You would just have one folder which is for credit cards and put everything in it. So the idea of the layers is a chunk of organization. So that's why I say you take the big areas of the illustration. So I'm going to have the first layer be background. Second layer, I'm going to have it be the shirt. The third layer, I'm going to have it be the face. The fourth layer, I'm going to have it be the hat. Fifth layer, I'm going to have it be the glasses. So as I said, you could organize this differently yourself. Once we've got started, we could also start adding detail into the illustration onto some sub-layers. So I'm going to begin here by drawing out this shape. So one of the main aspects of having you do this exercise is learning how to use the pen tool. You're going to want to zoom in, and remember we can see the photograph when in outline mode, so Command Y is to go into outline mode. Now you don't see the fill, all we see is the actual vector shape. We also don't see a stroke if there was a stroke on there. All we're seeing is the actual vector shape itself. And then as I drag along, you're going to drag the handles out in the direction that you're going, and you want to use as few points as possible. What that means is that you're going to add a point basically wherever there's a change in direction. So remember, what I'm drawing here is the shirt. I've drawn along this part, this is all shirt. Now I get into the head. What do I do when I get to the head? I could go around here, but I only want to draw this shape once, so I could either do it where the head goes on the top of the shirt, which I have the layers set so the face is in front of the shirt. So if I just was to go straight across here for the shirt now, and then continue, when I put the head over the top of it, this shape, this part of the neck of the illustration I'm drawing, is going to cover up the shirt anyway. So I'm just going to go straight across. This saves me some time. And it also means that the join between those two parts will be perfect, because one's sitting on top, you've got like this little bit of an overlap, which means that it will match exactly. So once we get down to here, I'm going to click one more time, go across to the end and click and drag. And then if I choose the eyedropper tool now, I can eyedropper the color from the photographic image. Now you might be surprised that when you eyedropper it, that the color comes out darker than you think. But don't forget that the image that we have is screened back because it's on that template layer. So visually it's a bit confusing, like it suddenly gets a lot darker when you eyedropper it, but that's why. Also, it might be surprising how intense the color is sometimes. If you double click on the eyedropper tool, there is a setting here to set it from point sample to 3x3 average or 5x5 average. So if it's a point sample, it's literally taking a particular pixel within that image and choosing that color. Whereas if you do 5x5, it's sort of averaging them from that area. Maybe you get a more representative color that way. Okay, so now we've got that shape. If we then make sure that this is on the right layer, so you can see I've now drawn this on the wrong layer. I drew it on the glasses layer, which I've also misspelled, just put glass. There we go. So I've got it on the wrong layer. This blue or turquoise colored square at the end of this layer indicates what's on that layer. So I'm going to drag this down and put this on the shirt layer. Now if I use the pen tool again, and I want to draw the face this time, and actually what I'm drawing is my face, my ears, my neck, anything which involves my skin color basically. So I'm going to go around here, clicking and dragging. Remember that you drag in the direction that you're going, and you want to use as few points as possible. You're adding a point basically wherever there's a change in direction. So it's going in a particular direction, and then there's a little bit of a bump, so we need to add an anchor point so that we can change the direction at that point. Sometimes that's very subtle, and depending on the style of illustration that you're going for, you may want to do this more loosely or super precise, and you may want to simplify it. You might want to make it smooth it out a little bit. But I'm just going to basically go around here. I'm going to get to the hat up here. The hat's going to sit on top of it. So just like I was talking about with the shirt, I'm just going to go up here a little bit so we have some extra. And then I'm going to eyedropper a basic area of color. Remember, you can click a few times to choose the actual area of color. It amazes me how pink I look when I eyedropper that. Part of that's the photograph, and that's partly the way I look. But it always kind of surprises me when you make it into one chunk of flat area of color. So we'll adjust the color afterwards. It's just to give us a basic kind of idea. And then we're going to go to the hat layer. We're going to draw that shape. Command Y. Go back into outline mode, and I'm going to draw this shape. So it starts over here, comes around, comes up here. This is a bit of a race against time, this video. I've got about 15 minutes before I have an appointment. So. For the purposes of this video anyway, I'm just going to give you the basic overview of it. I'm not going to go into too much detail. I haven't finished one that you can look at anyway. But basically I'm just going around here, and drawing out these various areas. Again, putting in just like a general area of color initially. So if I turn the template off, this is what I've got so far. And then I can go to the glasses layer and I can do the same thing. So the glasses are kind of interesting because they have a hole in them. So we're going to make a compound shape for this. I'm going to draw out the shape of the glasses. I'll try to make some videos going forward where I speed some of this process up. I need to work on that, but for right now you're going to have to put up with me just drawing around this whole shape. And then once I get back to the beginning again, I'm doing this by the way with a trackpad on my laptop. And it's a little easier actually if you have a pressure sensitive tablet, or even with a mouse it's a little bit easier, but certainly with a pressure sensitive tablet it helps. So this is the outside shape, but it also has some holes on the inside, right? So we've got this lens right here. When I'm doing the demonstration, I'm being a little bit looser than I might ordinarily be, just because I don't want to spend too long being picky. So a couple of other things about working with the pen tool. So first of all, if you hold Command, it will give you the previous selection tool. So we want to be on the direct selection tool first, but if you're not, you can always quickly change it. The advantage of that is that every time I choose Command now, I'll get the direct selection tool, which will allow me to go back and readjust handles or anchor points as I'm going along. So notice that if I hold Command, I've got the direct selection tool visible as my cursor, but over in the tool panel I'm still on the pen tool. So that means as soon as I let go of Command, I'm still on the pen tool and I'm still connected to the path. So I'll just carry on my merry way. Go around here. So again, I'm doing this a little bit rough, but I'll put it basically down. I can always readjust it later on. Another thing to remember is that you might want to do it, this depends again about the way you think about things. It might be a good idea for you to start kind of very loose and just block in the shapes and not worry too much about whether the paths are perfect, because you can always adjust them again. It's one of the great things about vector graphics, that it's very easy to go back and edit. So now I have these two shapes sitting over the top of each other. They're colored black, but that's kind of irrelevant because we're going to make them into a whole. And we're going to do that. You could do it one or two ways, or a few ways actually. Object, if you go down to Compound Path Make, Command 8, you could do it that way. So we've got a keyboard shortcut, which is useful for speed, obviously. Command 8, there we go, we've got that sorted. Or we could use the Shape Builder tool and Option click on those two shapes. That's another way of doing it. Or we could use Pathfinder minus front. But we want to create a hole in those glasses. Okay, and then going forward on the glasses, there may be some detail on the glasses, like these highlights that are on here help to define their form. And so I'm going to create another, what's called a sublayer. So with the glasses layer selected, I'm going to click here. This is going to add a layer inside of that layer, and I can name this layer. So let's call this glasses detail. So this area right here is not a layer. It may look like it's similar to a layer, but actually this is just a level. So every object that you draw in Illustrator occupies its own level. In this case it's a compound path, which is why it has that. Let's open this up a little bit so you can see it. You can see that this has a compound path. So there's two shapes which are combined, or multiple shapes, in this case three shapes actually, combined into one. But it's not the same as a layer. So this is a sublayer, this is a top level layer, and then this is a level. So on the glasses sublayer, now you don't have to necessarily create sublayers. This is, you know, we could keep this glasses detail just above the glasses. This is just an organizational thing. But if I want to make it into a sublayer, I can drag a top level layer over the top of an existing layer, so in this case the glasses, and now I have the glasses detail back inside the glasses. Okay, so now what I can do is on this layer I can go in here and I can create some shapes which we can use to represent these highlights. And then let's eyedropper that color. Let's make that a little bit lighter. This isn't showing up, so let's try to understand why this isn't showing up. I'm going to bring it out of the glasses layer for a second. Still not showing up. Maybe that shape didn't get drawn properly. Okay, now it seems to be working. So we'll go through here and draw out the rest of this shape. Not quite sure what happened there. Anyway, we'll put this back into the glasses layer. So now it's operating as a sub-layer. And you can see you could go in, you could add in more detail into there. And you could add detail into the hat layer, and you could add detail into the face layer. As I said, you don't necessarily have to put them as sub-layers within these other layers. It's just a way of organizing it. So, you know, it makes it easier to find stuff, I think. If you just have a few layers, like the main chunks, and then if you want to dig down deeper into it, you can open up that layer and you can see other layers inside there for the hat. So on the hat layer, for instance, I might do one which is just for this logo on the front, and I can call this logo. And actually I didn't put it as a sub-layer, so let's drag that into the hat. Now it's a sub-layer, and I can draw this over the top of this. So that's why I'm going to leave it at this point, because I've got a meeting that starts in about 9 minutes, and I think I've covered pretty much everything I wanted to cover. I'm going to go back to the original file and just point out a couple of things. So on here you'll see that, you know, I've got quite a lot of detail that I've gone in and added onto the face. I've got a bunch of weird layers in here because I was doing overlays and so on. So afterwards I'd gone into readjusting the color of it. I think I'm going to have to leave that for a different video. But you can look at this file. I'll upload this file as well to the class so you can dissect it a little bit. But you'll notice one of the things I wanted to point out is the way that you can use the shape, like this here, the way that this shape fades out or this shape fades out. You can use that as a way to express the way that the tonal value is fading out. So, sorry, like this part right here helps it feel like this shadow is fading into that part of the hat, even though it's really just two flat shapes. It almost creates kind of like the illusion of a sort of gradient of tonal value. So that's one thing to think about. Okay? Alright, I'll leave this video now. See you later. Bye.